I know what some of you might be thinking. You're probably thinking, Cooper, your upload schedule doesn't make any goddamn sense. You keep jumping between multiple big franchises and it doesn't seem like you can make up your mind about what you want to make a video about. Basically, I've been making some pretty lengthy videos for a while now, and I thought I'd steer into a different direction where I make more short-form videos now. That way you guys don't have to wait several months for me to post a huge video again, so I'm gonna try to start doing this now. The second question you're probably thinking is, wow, really, Cooper? After like 6 or 7 years of making game reviews, nearly 70 Coop's reviews, and the 20 plus Cooper's Perspective episodes you've made, after nearly 90 reviews, you're gonna finally look at the Mario franchise? What the hell took you so long, and why are you looking at the Mario franchise now? I don't know. I'm not sure if I really stated this on the channel yet, but me and the Red Plumber go pretty far back, since my entire childhood. Before Sonic, before Godzilla, before Power Rangers even, there was Mario. The earliest memories or more evidence I could find is when my sisters got an N64 for Christmas in 2000, when I was just 2 years old, and as you can see in this photograph, the hype in my young face just couldn't be hidden. The games I could recall them playing over and over again were the original Super Smash Bros., Mario Kart 64, and the one and only Super Mario 64. The latter was apparently played so often when I was little that my family used to joke that my first words actually ended up being,
"It's me, Mario!"
Not only did my sisters have the N64, but my cousins also had the Super Nintendo, where they also had their own Mario games on it. This included Mario All-Stars, Super Mario World, Yoshi's Island, and even Wario's Woods. So that's basically my earliest memories with Mario. I grew up playing the series on the SNES and N64. I skipped the GameCube for whatever reason, but then from the Wii onwards, I've tried keeping up to date with the latest Nintendo consoles and Mario games. Though, when it comes to the NES, I actually never played it before. Every experience I had with an NES game growing up was through emulators on PC, or through the classic Wii Virtual Console on the original Wii Shop channel. So growing up, I got accustomed to the updated All-Star versions of the games. It wasn't until the Wii era when I finally got to experience the original NES versions in all their 8-bit glory. But before I get to that, I should probably go over Nintendo's backstory. But since I imagine most of everyone watching this review are already pretty aware of how Nintendo started and all, I'll try summarizing it. The company was established in 1889 and got success from selling trading cards. Midway through the 1900s, they started diversifying by releasing toys. This eventually led to them experimenting with some early electronic arcade gaming but in 1970s. The earliest known time Nintendo would make something for the gaming market was an arcade venue game called Laser Clay Shooting System. There's very little photographs of it online, so best of luck trying to find info about it. Nintendo would eventually release their first ever home video game console, which was a Pong clone known as Color TV Game, exclusively released in Japan in 1977. While it was a Pong clone, there were some variations of it that included racing and computer games. It didn't take off super amazingly, but it did sell 3 million units before getting discontinued in 1983. Good luck buying one on eBay. Around the same time, Nintendo was still pursuing the arcade gaming market, and their first, I guess, traditional electronic arcade game would end up being Block Fever in 1978. It was apparently a blatant copy of Breakout. Oh, pre-80s Nintendo. While continuing to work in the arcade market, in 1980, they would release a new sort of electronic toy that would soon shift the path for the company in decades to come. This was when the first ever Game & Watch handheld, Ball, was released. Spearheaded by the late but great Gunpei Yokoi, the Game & Watch handhelds had little minigames on them and would pretty quickly become one of the earliest successes Nintendo ever had in the gaming market. The original 11-year run of Game & Watch handhelds managed to sell over 43 million units, which further motivated Nintendo to fully become a gaming company. This was when a young and aspiring game designer, Shigeru Miyamoto, would make a new arcade game with Gunpei Yokoi to be released in 1981. This was, of course, the original Donkey Kong. This game followed a red-suited carpenter, known as Jumpman at the time, trying to climb and dodge obstacles in order to save a girl called Lady, who would later become Pauline, from the title character, Donkey Kong. Since this was one of the earliest known platformers to ever be made, it kind of revolutionized gaming, and just like with the Game & Watch handhelds, Donkey Kong would become a huge success. It was Nintendo's biggest hit in the arcade market at the time, and it was so popular that Universal actually tried to sue Nintendo for copyright infringement, claiming they were ripping off King Kong. Though, through some weird copyright loopholes at the time, the court ruled in favor of Nintendo since Donkey Kong was clearly a parody/homage to King Kong, and wasn't really causing confusion or taking away profits from Universal. Regardless, Miyamoto and Gunpei Yokoi proved to be very important figures for Nintendo, since they both helped make some pretty huge hits for them. The two would continue their streak of successful arcade games, with the release of the classic Mario Bros. Around April of 1983. This game saw the return of Jumpman, who was now officially named Mario, and his occupation got changed from carpenter to plumber, and he even got a brother, Luigi. Mario and Luigi would hop around sewers getting rid of turtles, crabs, bugs, etc. Pretty basic fun. I remember playing the Super Mario Advance version of this over and over again as a kid. While not a huge record-breaking hit like Donkey Kong, Mario Bros. Still proved to be very popular, which is all the more impressive considering the year it got released. The infamous video game crash of 1983 was taking effect. Several gaming companies were overflowing the market with consoles, which led to a bunch of lackluster video games, leading to consumers not wanting to purchase all these mediocre products. The E.T. tie-in game and the Atari 2600 port of Pac-Man are seen as the main perpetrators for this. I wouldn't necessarily go that far, but they most definitely didn't help. But Mario Bros. Would not get affected by this since it was mainly the home console market that was suffering, not the arcade market. Donkey Kong and Mario Bros. Did receive ports on other consoles at the time, but I'm not sure how well they sold, especially Mario Bros. Despite the market crashing, Nintendo of Japan would still push to make their own home video game console that same year. It might seem crazy in retrospect, but it was also kind of understandable. They had success in the handheld market with the Game & Watch, and they also put out 2 hit arcade games. You might as well take a shot at the home market before it's totally dead. While this wasn't their first home console, this would be their first video game console that operated using cartridges. The console was the Family Computer, aka the Famicom, released in July 1983. At the time, it only launched with 3 games, and they were all ports of arcade games. Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Jr., and Popeye? Okay. It would take a while for the Famicom to be brought over to the US, which was seen as a big risk because the video game market there was still recovering from the crash. But the system got localized and released in 1985 as the Nintendo Entertainment System. This console would end up cementing Nintendo's place in gaming history forever. The Famicom only had 3 launch titles, while the NES had 17. That is super unheard of these days and probably won't happen ever again. This also included the failed accessory known as Rob, Robotic Operating Buddy, and its only 2 compatible games. We ain't here to talk about that though. While not the most perfect lineup in retrospect, there was one game in there that would not just be important for the success of the NES, but would probably become the catalyst for saving the world of gaming in general. Quite possibly one of the most important video games ever released. The original Super Mario Bros. Yet another project spearheaded by Miyamoto, but this time he actually produced the game himself instead of Gunpei Yokoi. But Shiggy was also accompanied by co-designer Takashi Tezuka. Tezuka previously worked on Devil World on the Famicom in 1984, so Super Mario Bros. Was actually his second video game ever. God damn, this dude came out swinging. The plot of Super Mario Bros. Involves the Mushroom Kingdom being invaded by the King of the Koopa, Bowser, who was referred to as King Koopa overseas for several years, despite always being called Bowser in most media, at least to my knowledge. Bowser had his minions take over the land, and the Mushroom People, who we'll recognize as Toad, were, according to the instruction manual, turned into mere stones, bricks, and even field horsehair plants, and the Mushroom Kingdom fell into ruin. Yes, a bunch of toads were actually morphed into stones and shit. Not only that, but a princess named Peach, who would be renamed as Princess Toadstool overseas for the next 11 years, is kidnapped and held captive by Bowser. So it's up to Super Mario, along with his brother Luigi, to go on an adventure through the Mushroom Kingdom to save all the Toads, defeat Bowser and his minions, along with rescuing the princess. Basic story, everyone knows it, makes for a perfect and simple premise. The gameplay is, okay, everyone knows the gameplay. It's a 2D side-scrolling platformer. As Mario, you can run holding the B button and jump with the A button, which was a control scheme that set a pretty major standard for NES games to follow. I'm pretty sure most of the people watching this review have also watched AVGN, but basically, if a NES game from back in the day had you jumping with B and using a different move with A, it's a shitty game. I'm not exactly sure how to describe how I feel about this game because it seems like almost everyone has said what needs to be said about it. Everything about this game is just so iconic. Mario's actual controls and movement hold up extremely well, even by today's standards. I've heard from most people who played this game that they just hold down the run button all the time, but I never really enjoyed playing it like that. Having the option to use and not use the run button makes controlling Mario feel really nice. I even love how decent Mario's momentum is in this game. I especially love the detail about how Super Mario is heavier when he jumps, while normal Mario can jump higher. Yeah, my subscribers might be shocked to hear this, but Sonic was not really the one who taught me about why momentum in platformers is super important. I learned that from this plumber's fat ass. Like, you guys would be shocked just how many games with amazing controls heavily rely on momentum. The power-ups are also super well known. We got the Mushroom, which grows Mario into Super Mario and can grant him an extra hit from an enemy. There's the Fire Flower, which changes Mario's outfit and allows him to shoot fireballs. There's the Starman, which can turn Mario invincible for a short while. You can get items in the iconic question mark blocks, which can also contain coins. There's even coins spread across most of the levels, along with these short bonus areas you can find by traveling in warp pipes. As everyone knows about this game, there's a life function, meaning if you lose all your lives, you get a game over. You can get extra lives by either collecting 100 coins as you play the game, or you can find a hidden 1-up mushroom. You can also get extra lives by racking up enough points. When it comes to the enemies in this game, the Goombas and Koopas are the most common ones. You can stomp on them to kill them, or in the Koopas case, you can jump on them and kick them away while they're in their shell. Their shells can also hurt you too, so be sure to jump out the way. The piranha plants can pop out of warp pipes. If you're a complete loser like me, you have more than likely looked up speedruns of this game, both normal and tool assisted. When watching them, you might be shocked at just how painfully close Mario's sprite can get with an enemy. That's because the hitbox on his actual sprite is not as precise as it may look. That means these super tight jumps can be achieved pretty easily if you're skilled enough with the game. Like, it's a very simple compliment, but jumping over piranha plants at the perfect angle is just one of my absolute favorite things to do in this game. There are other enemies you can encounter in later parts of the game. Laticue is obnoxious. He just flies around and drops spiny enemies. The Hammer Brothers are bitches and can be super irritating to deal with if you're Tiny Mario. The Bullet Bills are also pretty irritating, and the Buzzy Beetle can't be killed by fireballs. There's also the Cheep Cheeps, which only appear in a few levels. There's one where they're leaping from the water that you have to avoid, and they're one of the main obstacles in the underwater levels. The other memorable enemy is the Blooper Squids, which you only come across in 3 parts of the game, but they can still be pretty annoying to dodge when swimming. Overall, classic, sometimes annoying, but classic enemies. Mario travels to 8 different worlds with 4 levels each. The 4 main themes of the worlds are the standard overworld, the underground levels, the athletic levels with more platforming challenges, and the castles that you play through at the end of every world. Due to this being a very early on NES game, and with the console's limited color palette in mind, the most variety we really get are day and night looking levels. Though sometimes there are slight differences, like how worlds 3, 6, and 7 are meant to be snow themed since both the grass and trees are white, plus there's the 2 underwater levels in World 2-2 and World 7-2, along with there being a short section in World 8-4. Hell, I think World 1-1 would be a great topic for a video on its own. Just the way it was meticulously designed is interesting. When you look at the concept art, you'll see that a lot of the levels were actually made using graph paper, which honestly makes a lot of sense. Miyamoto and Tezuka did a really extraordinary job with the first level since it helps introduce how the game plays, along with displaying how the rest of it's gonna play out. It's the perfect tutorial level without actually being a tutorial level. The castles are easily the most difficult levels in the world. These contain fire-based obstacles and lava pits that Mario can fall into, and they all end with a boss encounter with Bowser, who mainly breathes fire and jumps. But in later castles they have Bowser throwing hammers and shit, which actually kinda scared the shit out of me when I was a kid. A pretty interesting detail for Worlds 1 to 7 is that you're actually fighting a fake Bowser. You don't fight the real Bowser until World 8. You can figure this out by defeating one of the Bowsers using a fire flower. When they die, they'll turn into a different enemy falling into the lava. It's a pretty fascinating detail. Another thing about the castle levels, specifically the ones in Worlds 4, 7, and 8, is that they have puzzles in the actual level map that you'll need to figure out. So if you find yourself looping in the levels and timing out over and over again, it's probably because you couldn't find the right pathway. And yes, you can time out, with it counting down from 400 pretty fast. In case anyone's wondering, in real time it's actually like 160 seconds, which is approximately 2 minutes and 40 seconds. What's pretty funny is that the inspiration for the first Sonic game was that Yuji Naka would play through World 1-1 over and over again, just to see how fast he could beat the level. So Sonic owes a lot of elements from Mario, and it didn't occur to me until I made this review that another element it took from Mario was probably having a damn time limit. However, Sonic's time limit is 10 minutes as opposed to Mario's 2 minutes and 40 seconds. So I guess Yuji Naka must have thought that he was being a clever dog with that one. Too bad he couldn't get himself out of jail. Anyways, World 8 in general is just the most difficult world to get through, which makes sense, it's the final world. Which means that 8-4 is understandably the hardest level in the game. It's also the only level in the game where going through warp pipes is required for level progression. Every other warp pipe you can travel in just takes you to a bonus area. This is kind of an embarrassing confession for me to make, but I've never actually beaten the original Mario in one sitting. I've always had to use save states to finish it. So yeah, I hate to break it to everyone, but I was recording footage using the NES Online app, so I wasn't playing it authentically. But the game emulates just fine and had no input lag, though I did notice in World 7-1, there was a bit of slowdown in the emulator. That was kinda strange. So when you beat a castle in the first 7 worlds, you end up saving a Toad, who says the infamous line, "Our princess is in another castle," which everyone has made fun of at this point. Oh, and as a reminder, these 7 Toads are not the only ones in the game. If we recall in the manual, all the other ones were turned into blocks and stuff. And I know people like to joke that when Mario breaks a block, that must mean the Toads are being killed, but that's not actually the case. They're getting set free by Mario when he breaks them out the blocks. Sorry to rain on everyone's parade. Of course, since you don't fight the real Bowser until World 8, this also means after you defeat him, Mario finally rescues Peach. I still love her classic sprite colors. I also love how she has alternate costumes in Smash Bros. That pay homage to it. It's really cute. And that's really the entire game. I guess the one major aspect about this game I didn't really discuss yet is the music, composed by the one and only Koji Kondo. Like a lot of the other aspects about this game, what else can really be said about the music? It's a major reason why this game is so damn legendary. I don't even have to play a sample from this game's soundtrack because you're already aware of how it sounds. You're probably humming it right now. It's great. We all know it's great. It's iconic. I guess it would be worth noting that at the time, background music wasn't really a common thing in games. So what Koji Kondo did here was very simple, but was also greatly important for the future of gaming. It's only a 6-track score, but you remember every theme. The catchy overworld, which would become the main theme of the entire franchise, the cool underground music, the soothing underwater tune, even the castle music's more intense sound fits it perfectly. I honestly just want to know what was going through Koji Kondo's head when he was making this soundtrack at the time. Like, was he aware that these basic music tracks were going to become so legendary, and also connect with multiple generations of literal millions of children growing up? I think the best description about Kondo's music that I've ever heard was done by director Edgar Wright, back when he had to ask permission to use Nintendo's themes in the 2010 movie, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. While this was mainly so they could use the Fairy Fountain theme from Zelda, that was also composed by Koji Kondo, and Edgar wrote a letter about his music and I think he described it pretty damn perfectly. The music is like the nursery rhymes to a generation. That's honestly a pretty perfect way of looking at it. I really couldn't have found a better way of explaining how Koji Kondo's themes really connect with people so well. The music is absolutely iconic, just like the rest of the game, which I'm not really sure what else there is to say. The simplicity of this game being one of the first and, in turn, most groundbreaking 2D side-scrollers ever released just made it hold up really well. Seriously, have you ever actually met someone who looked at the original Super Mario Bros. And was just like, this game kinda sucks now, it aged pretty horribly. Like, what the fuck would they be talking about? It feels weird to me trying to criticize this game because it's kind of flawless. Like, yeah, there's no save feature, mainly due to the limitations of the NES hardware. They weren't really putting save batteries in the cartridges just yet. I'm also not a fan of how when you get hit with the Fire Flower power-up, it turns you back into smaller Mario. I greatly prefer how it is in the later games where when you get hit with a power-up, Mario would just turn back into regular big Mario. But should I really scrutinize this near 40-year-old game that was the first in this big franchise, meaning these later fixes in the future games didn't exist yet? Like, is that a really fair thing to bring up? Hell no, I'm not a pretentious asshole. So the question isn't really, do I recommend this game? It's more, do I even need to? You've more than likely played it and replayed it a million times at this point, and across multiple different versions and ports. Just go play it again if you're in the mood to. It's simple, classic platforming fun. And even then, there's a few Easter eggs in the game if you're curious. The most obvious secret in the game are the warp zones you can come across in 1-2 and 4-2. Basically, if you can find the warp zones, it can help send you to a future world. It basically makes up for this game's lack of a save feature. Especially since, if you can find the warp zone to World 8 fast enough, you can actually beat this game in under 5 minutes if you're good enough. Plus, if you beat the game, you can actually unlock a world select at the title screen. This is pretty cool, though I think if you shut the game off, it'll go away, which is a bit dumb. Though there is an extra part of the game where if you get a game over and go back to the title screen, holding A and pressing start will actually let you continue on the world that you were last at. Wait a minute, does that mean they hid the save function behind a cheat code? But getting back to the warp zones, there's a pretty funny glitch you can do in World 1-2, where if you reach the end and break a few blocks on the ceiling, carefully crouch jumping can make Mario phase through the wall into the warp zone. What's interesting is that while Mario is in the warp zone, the actual coding for the pipes is incorrect. So if you get into the warp room and hop into the first pipe without it fully loading, it'll take you to world -1. It's a forever looping underwater level. I have no idea why it warps you here and why it loops forever, but it's pretty damn funny. Another pretty funny thing about the warp zone is that if you slowly inch your way into the second warp pipe, it'll take you to world 5. Huh. And I guess it would be kinda stupid for me to not mention this extra part of the game, but there's the famous infinite 1-up trick, which I can't really pull off. Like, I can barely do it, but it seems to require the right positioning and whatnot. Crazy how I figured out how to do the backwards long jump in Mario 64, but somehow not the 1-up trick in Mario 1. The only extra mode in the game is the 2-player mode, which lets the second player control Luigi. There's no difference in gameplay, he plays the exact same as Mario. I find it funny looking at the original color schemes for both Mario and Luigi. Mario with a brown shirt is an interesting choice, but I do kinda dig the red overalls. And Luigi is literally just his Fire Flower color palette. And it's made even funnier that when he gets the Fire Flower power up, he just looks the exact same as Mario. All he did was switch shirts. And that's all there really is for me to talk about. I'm not sure what else to mention about this game besides the damn box art. The American cover is just pretty iconic, which I'm pretty sure I've said about this game a million times. But it's also kinda morbid when you realize it's a photo of Mario falling to his death in a castle lava pit, and the Japanese cover art is just adorable. It was actually designed by Miyamoto himself. Bowser's gray, which is a bit weird, but Mario just looks so wholesome and epic. Classic. As I'm sure we're all aware, Mario 1 ended up being a major success and launched the gaming franchise we all know and love, along with helping save the gaming market that was damn near dead by the time it released in the US. This game managed to sell 58 million copies worldwide, mainly thanks to the fact that it was a pack-in copy for the NES, which, by the way, would go on to sell nearly 62 million units. So thank you, Mario, and Dunk Hunt, apparently. Again, I'm not sure what else there is to say about this game's legacy. So here's a few stuff about some cut content that didn't make it in the game. Did you know Mario was originally gonna have a fucking gun? Yeah, early on, it was gonna be more of a shooting game than a platformer. So Mario was originally gonna be wielding a rifle or beam gun to shoot enemies. This was obviously dropped and later got reworked into the Fire Flower power-up. But there does exist a concept sketch of the game's original control scheme, jumping with up and Mario with a gun. Good lord. A pretty funny behind the scenes tidbit is that Mario wasn't always gonna collect coins. Initially they were using fruit, you know, kinda like Pac-Man. But Miyamoto realized that placing random fruit in the levels probably would've confused the players, and it more than likely would've came off as an obstacle for them to jump over. So he decided to change the fruit into something that he knew people would want to go after. He explained the process of changing it in an Iwata Ask interview. Thus, when we were thinking about something that anyone would look at and go, I definitely want that, we thought, yep, it's gotta be money. And that's why we have coins in Mario. God, that's funny. There were also going to be these sky-themed bonus stages, which would have had Mario flying on a cloud of some kind and shooting enemies. This would later get repurposed for future games as bonus areas where Mario goes up in the clouds, along with just the regular mechanic of Mario flying in clouds in future games. But did you also know that Yoshi was planned as far back as this game? Yeah, Miyamoto wanted to have Mario riding a dinosaur companion. There's even a concept sketch of it. Obviously, they couldn't implement this idea because of the limitations of the NES, so our dinosaur companion wouldn't come to light until Super Mario World with the debut of Yoshi. On the topic of Mario World, remember the Giga Leak and how it had prototype sprites from Mario World? Does anyone else think that the prototype Yoshi kinda resembles the original concept sketch from Mario 1? It's pretty interesting in retrospect. Moving on, not really relating to outright cut content, but apparently Lakitu wasn't just supposed to be dropping the Spinies straight down, he was originally meant to throw them in a curved angle. This would be how he functioned in Mario 3, but he didn't do this in the original Mario apparently due to a glitch? Interesting. Also, the ending background music for when you rescue Peach was also slightly cut. Koji Kondo originally composed the theme with an ABBA structure, but due to memory limitations, one of the B sections had to get removed. Thankfully though, the full original ending music would get used in a future 8-bit Mario game, which was... I'll get to it later. One last unused theme, kind of a weird one, but there's an alternate version of the Game Over music. It's similar to the final version, but it was more simple sounding. Here's a comparison. And that's that. If you want to go play Mario 1, the original NES version got ported to multiple future Nintendo consoles. Right now, you can stream the game using the Nintendo Switch Online service for the standard $20 a year. Again, it emulates just fine and doesn't appear to have any input lag. But when it comes to previous versions of the game, there was the original Virtual Console release on Wii, which is completely gone, and it was also on the Wii U, which is gonna be shutting down soon. But there is one purchasable version of the game you can get on Switch. This is the Arcade Archives release of Versus Super Mario Bros., which was released in the arcade a few months after the NES version in 1986. It's an interesting version of the game, and I would recommend it if you guys want to digitally own a version of this game on Switch without needing an online subscription, and maybe it could be interesting for certain gamers who have maybe played the original NES version over and over again, and maybe want to see what the Versus version is like. So check it out! It seems the only Nintendo console that Mario 1 never saw a port of some kind on, at least without hacking, was the N64. Yes, you can even play the first Super Mario Bros. On GameCube. Some of you may be thinking, but how? Well, you simpleton, did you never play Animal Crossing? Yep, there are NES ROMs on the Animal Crossing disc. And yes, they were also on the original N64 version of Animal Forest, but to my knowledge, I don't think that version had Super Mario Bros. So yeah, one of the games you can unlock in the GameCube version was the original Super Mario, if you knew how to access it. Yeah, a lot of these NES ROMs can only be unlocked by winning them at Tom Nook's Lottery, or through external methods like using the Nintendo e-cards. When it comes to unlocking Super Mario Bros., the only way you were able to actually do so was in the Japanese Animal Forest Plus version through a 2001 to 2002 Famitsu giveaway, meaning the only way you can get the game now is through Action Replay. So yeah, while technically not meant to be accessed normally, this is still a port of Super Mario Bros. That can be played on GameCube, so go check it out if you're curious. It plays pretty good. Continuing a step further back, while there wasn't really a port of any kind on the N64, there was a port on Game Boy Color called Super Mario Bros. Deluxe. I never played it, but it seemed like a pretty solid port, despite the screen crunch. Strangely, while the GBA saw the Super Mario Advance series of ports, none of those releases ever included Super Mario Bros. I assumed it was because Deluxe was able to be played on Game Boy Advance due to its backwards compatibility, so maybe they thought a remaster wasn't necessary, but they also made a separate GBA port of the first Mario that wasn't part of the Mario Advance series? What the fuck? I mean, it looks alright. The sprites look a bit funny, but whatever, I'm not gonna play this version. Alright, I've gone far enough. It's time to talk about the first real port or remaster of Super Mario Bros. 1 that I actually grew up playing. In 1993, Nintendo decided to release a collection game for the Super Nintendo called Super Mario All-Stars. This collection included the first 3 Mario games, with Mario 1 getting probably the most interesting upgrades. For starters, all the games have a save feature now, which is super helpful. The game plays just fine, pretty damn similar to the original NES version actually, but the most obvious upgrades are the graphics and music. Each world is given a whole lot more variety thanks to the Super Nintendo's much better graphical capabilities, and the soundtrack is especially more lively and sweet. It was handled again by Koji Kondo with help from Soyo Oka, who also helped make some of the additional tracks on this collection. The underwater theme sounds so much more pretty now. The castle music sounds perfect, and even the Bowser fights were given new boss tracks, which is funny because they only last about 10 seconds, but I still love that added detail a lot. They even created new bonus music for the short bonus areas, and they added sound cues to help figure out the castle mazes. Wow. I love how echoey the underground music can sound, and the overworld music is just as iconic and catchy as always, but I don't know, I still kinda prefer the original 8-bit rendition. Probably because it's literally the OG first level music. But the All-Stars version is still pretty good. I also love the new title screen arrangement. It's so pretty. Overall, I'd say All-Stars is probably the best version of the game, so I'd highly recommend it. It looks and sounds phenomenal, it plays just like the original, and I'm sure the added save function will help newer players. Obviously, if you're gonna play this collection, it'll likely be on the Super Nintendo Online streaming for Switch, which also includes save states, and rewinding. I also want to mention how this collection was ported to the Wii in 2010? No bonus features or anything, it was literally just the Super Nintendo ROM being emulated on a Wii disc. I mean, despite the cool extra stuff you can get by buying this game physically, this was such a confusing ass release. Like, if they were just gonna put a ROM on a disc, then why didn't they at least use the version of All-Stars that had Mario World on it? I know I'm not the first to bitch about that, but literally, why didn't they do that? Well, whatever. Check out All-Stars whenever you guys can. It has a fantastic version of Mario 1, and plus, whenever you're done playing this game, you'll have other games on the collection to check out too. There's even a bonus game included, Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels. Oh no, I gotta talk about this game now. So after the smash hit success of the original Super Mario Bros., Miyamoto and Tezuka were developing a version for the arcade market, which would later become Versus Super Mario Bros. It was while making this new version that Miyamoto, being the fucking secret sadist that he is, came up with newer, challenging level designs that he really liked. He eventually decided that they should just make a new game altogether, totally separate from Versus Super Mario Bros. And this would end up becoming Super Mario Bros. 2. Yes, just 9 months after the first game, and a fucking sequel was already out. And seeing how the first Mario game got released just 1 month after its debut in Japan, Mario 2 did not get released outside of Japan for decades. Why? Well, apparently, once Nintendo of America received the game for distribution, upon doing playtesting, they would actually reject it because they found the game too difficult to release here. You see, Miyamoto specifically designed the levels in this new game to be suited for players who maybe mastered the original levels in the first game, which was pretty forward thinking at the time, but it doesn't necessarily mean it was a good call. Here's a quote from Howard Phillips whenever he was playtesting the game for Nintendo of America. America. As I continued to play, I found that Super Mario Bros. 2 asked me again and again to take a leap of faith, and each of those leaps resulted in my immediate death. This was not a fun game to play. It was a punishment. Undeserved punishment. I put down my controller, astonished that Mr. Miyamoto had chosen to design such a painful game. God damn. So yeah, the original Mario 2 did not come to America and led to a different Mario 2 to get made, which is a story for a different review. The OG Mario 2 would never see a release outside of Japan until its inclusion in Super Mario All-Stars, which actually altered the game slightly so casual players wouldn't have a completely miserable time with it. However, the original NES version of the game would finally see an official release in the US through the Wii Shop channel in 2007, and it's also part of the Nintendo Switch Online service, which means nowadays we have very easy access to it. I do not recommend playing the original version of Mario 2. Fuck, I wouldn't even recommend the updated version on All-Stars either. This game is a bitch to play through. There are design choices in every level that are just unbelievable. There's so many leaps of faith. You're gonna be save stating and rewinding a million times, and just a lot of bullshit. As Mario, it plays the exact same, but not even Mario's solid controls can make these hellish levels fun. I guess the first thing to really notice that the 2-player mode was completely removed, though I wouldn't really imagine myself wanting to play this game with a friend willingly. Instead, we have a separate Mario and Luigi mode. Yeah, this is technically the first character select in a Mario game, and it's not just a color palette swap. Luigi actually plays differently. He can jump higher and his feet are very slippery on the ground. So, Lost Levels is actually where these specific traits for Luigi originated from, and would get implemented in future games, most notably Smash Bros. That sounds cool on paper, but in the original game, Luigi sucks! He sucks so much! Lost Levels is hard enough, why the fuck would you want to play as slippery ass Luigi? Are you a glutton for punishment? Okay, I am bitching, but I will admit, when I first played this game as a child on the Virtual Console, I picked Luigi because I actually liked him more than Mario. And I liked how this game had a separate option for him. I loved his higher jumping, and I actually thought the bad ground friction was pretty funny. The game was still kicking the shit out of me, but I didn't care because I was a dumb kid and I just loved Luigi. But as an adult, it sucks cock, dude. Like, are there any positives about this game? The graphics look a bit nicer. It can look almost identical to the first game, but some of the levels and textures are actually a bit more detailed. The text on the HUD has drop shadows now, and the music is the exact same. Well, for the most part. The game also includes the same items and power-ups, but it also introduces the Poison Mushroom, which can hurt Mario if he touches it. Now, that doesn't sound too bad at first. Just avoid getting the Poison Mushroom. But I swear, Miyamoto specifically placed these assholes in annoying locations just to piss off the players, so he might end up touching a Poison Mushroom without even meaning to. It's super irritating, and it doesn't help that the Poison Mushroom uses the exact same sprite as the normal mushroom, just in a darker shade. Oh, and some of the later levels includes a new level obstacle, the Wind, which mechanic-wise is pretty interesting for an NES game to pull off, but it's still such an annoying-ass obstacle. And what makes it worse is that the Wind is sometimes required for getting past certain level designs. What the fuck is wrong with you? All the castles are like 10 times harder, and 8-4 is especially more difficult. There are 2 fucking Bowsers you need to get past. 2! Why are there 2? Is this a joke? But then once you beat the game, you get sent to World 9? What the fuck? It's a bonus, more challenging world for people who made it through the game. 3 of these levels are underwater based and are chrome looking? Yeah, the graphics here are a bit strange. And for some reason 9-3 is a castle level and it looks weird as hell. What are they even trying to do here? Well, at least 9-4 has some Japanese text in it that apparently translates to thank you, as a way of thanking and congratulating players for getting through this really hard as hell game. I mean, it's cute. Miyamoto is still an asshole for designing this, but cute. Once you beat World 9, there isn't really much else. But if you maybe weren't tortured enough, there are 4 more bonus worlds that you can unlock. These are worlds A through D, which are far more challenging levels, and I wasn't really able to get them in the original Famicom version. How come? Well, the requirement to unlock them in the original version involves beating the game 8 fucking times. Who hurt you? This is not a sequel. This is a shitpost ROM hack made in the 80s, sold as an official game. It's easy to see why they didn't want to release this game outside of Japan back in 86. Like, it's nothing at all like the first game and probably would have alienated gamers at the time. So how the hell am I supposed to recommend this game to casual players? I just can't. I guess if you really loved and mastered the original Super Mario Bros., then check out the original Mario 2 if you want a bigger challenge, you fucking lunatics. Lost Levels usually gets paired with the original game, even as far back as the Game Boy Color's Deluxe port. It's included in that port as Super Mario Bros. For Super Players, which is a very fitting retitle. Weirdly enough, Worlds 9 plus A through D are unused in this port, but the files for them can still be found on the ROM. Weird. Of course, the original NES version was released on both the Wii and Wii U virtual consoles, and it's streamable on the Nintendo Switch Online service. Again, I don't recommend this version because it's a pain in the ass. While I said I wouldn't even recommend the All-Stars port, it is still a little better. This version included the same graphics and music upgrades the first game got, along with including a much better checkpoint system, and there's a new save function for casual players. Obviously, Nintendo Switch Online has the save states and the rewind function, so I'd recommend playing the game while heavily utilizing those features. The All-Stars version also includes a new arrangement of the underwater theme for Lost Levels title screen, and it sounds so damn beautiful. Seriously, play this song at my funeral. Oh yeah, I guess if there is one weird downside about the All-Stars graphical upgrade, it's that World 9's weirdness was kind of toned down. I wish it still had the strange chrome look of the NES version, but now it just looks like all the other regular underwater levels. Ah well. In more positive news, the insane requirement to get to World A through D was removed, so you can just play through those worlds after you beat the game normally and get through World 9. Thank God. They're a pain in the ass, but what else is new? It's the Lost Levels. As much as I've been bitching about this game, I don't actually hate it. Like, this game is ball-bustingly hard 101% of the time, but it was designed that way. It's not meant for gamers like me, and it wasn't even originally released over here to begin with, so it would be kinda weird if I just kept complaining about it again and again. It's not worth it. So go check it out if you're morbidly curious, but maybe stick with the All-Stars version just to be safe. While still on the topic of ports, the Lost Levels got a Classic Series GBA release like the first game, but since this was during a time where the original NES version was never released overseas yet, the GBA port was Japan exclusive. But despite everything I've said, it is kind of worth getting because the packaging on it is super cute and cool. They based it off the original Famicom release packaging. That's such an adorable attention to detail. So yeah, maybe get this for collector's sake, but not so much for playing the actual game. By the way, you guys remember the NES Classic Edition console? I never got it, mainly because I wasn't very interested in getting it, and also because they sold out really quickly and the market for them skyrocketed the price, which is bullshit. But the three main Mario games got included, but Lost Levels was completely left out. Now, I assume that this was maybe just for the American NES version release, since Lost Levels was never actually put on the NES. But no, even on the Japanese Famicom Classic Edition, Lost Levels is still nowhere to be seen. It does have a Mario 2 on it, but it's the other Doki Doki Mario 2 that we got over here. It's on the Famicom Classic under its Japanese name, Super Mario USA. I wonder why Lost Levels wasn't included in the Famicom Classic Edition. Whatever. I don't know how to end this review. I can only sing the praises and respect the legacy of Mario 1 so much, along with bitching about the design of Lost Levels for so long, so I think I'll just stop here. The next time I look at a Mario game, it'll be the version of Super Mario Bros. 2 that the US and the rest of the world got in 1988. Until then, I'll see you guys in the next review, and thanks for watching.